Okay guys, this will be video 2 on our series on how to cover a profile fuselage. We're going to use Kano coat for a couple different reasons. First of all, this video series is more of a focus on beginner's guide to applying iron-on film, not because we're not going to do an outstanding job, but more of we're only going to use one color for the entire aircraft. So that's it. The whole thing is going to be white for reasons based on the owner of the aircraft. So what we're going to do is we're going to cover this fuselage first as video 2 in the series. Video 1 was prepping. The reason we're going to cover the fuselage this way is we're going to assemble this aircraft like an ARF model. So the person who receives this aircraft will actually assemble it as though it was a new ARF that he purchased. I think it'd be kind of cool, a little easier that way, than certainly cheaper than shipping an entire airplane. Okay, so if you've never covered a fuselage, you would treat it as you were covering an oddly shaped tail feather section. So the high point of this particular aircraft is actually 5 inches across. So from the top of the canopy to the bottom, you know, kind of swing it around a little bit. It's actually like 4 7/8, so we're going to call it 5 inch. If you have not used iron-on covering at all, if you follow these instructions, it should get you awfully close. Usually takes 1 or 2 of these as practice until you get the principles. So for the simplest application, if it's 5 inches, we're actually going to cut 7, because you want an inch overhanging to be able to grab and pull, because you'll want to stretch this as you apply the heat. Typically I like to measure this across, not only to make sure it's straight, but to make sure you know, this line is straight, and make sure it's straight this way off the roll. In this particular instance, we're going to have so much waste, I really don't care. So we're going to create the first straight line on the roll with our first cut. We're going to measure 7 inches up, but then we're also going to take our straight edge. I'm cutting on a glass surface, so if you can see where the roll is setting, it will stop on the glass, so I can actually pull my roll out. So I want to pull it, give myself some excess, just put a weight on it so it keeps it out of your way. Grabbed the wrong knife. Okay, so I want to measure, I mark twice, obviously, so I get a straight line, but I want to line up the marks on the ruler. Let me get the camera a little bit closer so I can show you what I'm talking about. I want to get the marks on the ruler to be perpendicular with the color itself on both sides. And as you can see, if the marks are perpendicular, my measurements are off. And the reason for that is actually because when they cut these rolls off, this last edge is not really straight. So like I said, in this particular instance, what we're doing, we're going to have a lot of waste, so I don't really care. And that's okay, because we're going to create this straight edge for the next several cuts or the rest of the roll, however you want to say it. So to make very sure that we are straight, I always cut with the roll rolled out through the bottom. That way I can pull it easier, but also whenever I cut it, it wants to roll up out of the way. It actually makes it a lot easier to cut that way. So now we have one side of our entire fuselage. If you were, before I fail to mention anything, every time I make marks, I usually just use a Sharpie, and whenever I mark the iron-on material, I mark it on the clear backing film so that I can remove it and throw it away. I don't have any marks anywhere that I have to clean off. If you have to, and you use the Sharpie on the color portion that stays on the airplane, that's okay. Monocoat trim solvent will take it off with absolutely no problem. If you guys will bear with me for 2 seconds. This camera does not have a pause feature. I switched cameras. Okay, so your iron, it doesn't matter if you have a new iron, an iron that's 30 years old. They all work the same. What's important is the temperature. So, go to Harbor Freight and get a temp gauge. Order a 21st century temp gauge from Tower Hobbies. If you don't want to mess with it and you don't mind buying a brand new iron, order a 21st century iron. You have the thermostat or temperature control right here. It's very accurate. I don't have my temp meter anywhere with me, otherwise I would show you. Whatever I set this at, as soon as it starts blinking and you check the temp on the shoe, it's very accurate. So we're using Econo Coat, and Econo Coat shrinks and adheres and does everything at 275 degrees. So if you set your iron at 275, you're good. You don't have to mess with anything else. You get a full shrink rate at 275. I personally, I would love to say always use a sock, but I can't say always, obviously, because I don't have one here. It's only because all the local hobby shops in town are out of 21st century socks, and they're not the same. So, if you were using a sock, you set your temperature at 10% higher than what your covering requests. So if this were 275, you'd set it up to 290 or whatever. So that's really the only difference. I prefer the sock, especially if you're just starting out, because the sock doesn't drag along the surface. And until you get that feel for how quick you need to move, if you don't have a sock, you're going to notice that it'll be sticky feeling. It'll like if you try to do it on your hand, it's going to be very draggy. I would recommend a sock. A lot of people don't do it because they say their iron doesn't get hot enough. If that were the case, buy a new iron. If you're good without the sock, you're good without it. It's fine, but you start to wear into this shoe, you get scratches and stuff. Okay, so our iron is up to temp. Excuse me. The iron is up to temp. We have more than enough material to cover what we're doing, The key areas that we're going to focus on is sticking to these doublers. We're actually going to start right here and work our way back because we're going to have to stretch and iron over these doublers at the same time. I'm kind of limited in this camera. I really hope this comes out because when you're ironing this stuff on, it requires a lot of movement. So let's see how this works. I don't want to miss anything, so this would be a good, I don't know where the camera eye is on this thing. Okay, this would be a good first example. On this first swipe, see how we have wrinkles and it's not all the way to the rounded edge yet. That's okay. This is a trick that you're going to have to learn and you're going to have to start to deal with, is where these wrinkles are, pull them tight and pull them away from the wood. Take the tip of your iron, shrink that wrinkle out like this, okay? Shrink it up past the roll and then roll the Monocoat onto the surface. And now where I just did that little section right there does not have that wrinkle anymore. You're gonna have to do that in a couple of spots because this is not straight. If this were a straight piece, you would never have to do this. So this is part of the difficulty of doing a fuse, is a couple times you're gonna have to do that up front, is get rid of those wrinkles first. So I'm actually just touching the iron kind of to my finger. I'm sandwiching the covering between my finger and the iron, and then I get rid of those wrinkles along that edge. And I only have to do that a couple times, and then for the most part, I'm just going to be able to swipe that right across and I'll be done. This really does not take long at all to do. So, like I said, I want to get this tight. It's almost like you want to heat the covering first and then push it down onto the wood. You're going to get a lot of funny looking wrinkles. Don't even worry, this is not touching the wood yet, so we don't worry about that. But this part where I'm ironing it down, see how it's nice and smooth and I have no wood grain? That means I prep my surface properly and I'm doing this properly because I'm not getting any kind of wrinkles or anything weird going on. I know it shows right here, but that's not adhered yet, so that will be in just a moment. I actually... I will end up breaking this up into a couple of pieces on the video segment. I thought maybe I would just do this in one shot, but because of this camera, I can't pause the camera. But I also don't want to leave out any of these key details, because if you follow these details, your fuse is going to look amazing. It's going to look painted. So, if you can see where our outline is. Okay, so this is the canopy up here. Now, this is not adhered yet. This section is really nice. So what I want to do is pull these wrinkles out. See the wrinkles? I'm going to pull them out by hand. Then I'm going to heat the covering up, kind of shrink out some of those wrinkles, then touch it to the wood. That is the technique that you're going to follow all the way down the fuse. Basically, once I get past this canopy, and it's a much straighter line, see how straight it is top and bottom, and you can actually see that is the wing saddle area, that line, and it's very smooth. all the way up. That's how the entire fuse is going to turn out, okay? So you're going to get weird wrinkles along the way. Don't worry about that. Take your time. This is already, you know, kind of a longer video. It's 15 minutes. If I wasn't making the video, this entire side would have been done. I should be able to cover this fuse in about 30 to 45 minutes doing one color. It's very easy. I just don't want to miss anything to where you guys who are just starting out don't have a great experience. This is very easy. It's very fun to do. And whenever you do this right, it looks really good. You know, nothing can replace paint. But for those of you like myself, I live in an apartment. I have nowhere to paint. I'm not going to paint. This is a very good alternative, and there is very good ways to make this a great looking aircraft. So what I'm going to do, in the interest of time, is I'm going to go ahead and break this up. We'll just call this part 1 of covering the fuse, and we will start back up here and finish this off. I'll show you guys how great this is going to look, okay? Thank you.